It's day 2 of 14 days thinking about Anne Boleyn, and today we're going to think about her father, Thomas Boleyn. Now, I know when I talked about Catherine of Aragon, I wanted a real focus on the women in her life, but I do think it's important to look at both Thomas and George because they really feed into Anne's story. And I think there's this assumption that a lot of what happened to Anne was because of her father's ambition, and I kind of want to look at that a little bit today. In contrast to his wife Elizabeth, a huge amount is known about Thomas Boleyn, and really he's a week's worth of videos in himself. I'm not going to give him a week. I'm not covering everything Thomas Boleyn today. I am just cherry picking a few little bits. Thomas Boleyn was born around 1476, and when Henry VIII came to the throne, he was the ideal courtier. Henry was young and obsessed with the idea of war, and Thomas was one of these men that really supported that dream, not like the older members of Henry VII's council who were a lot more let's chill out a little bit here. He supported Henry's dreams of triumph in France. He took a huge part in all of the entertainments and the tournaments. He would always be willing to dress up in whatever production was going on at court that time. In terms of his education, we know that he could read Latin. He employed a humanist scholar, and he actually commissioned 3 works from Erasmus, which must have been quite expensive. He had great linguistic skills. He was charming. He had knowledge about hawks and about bowls. He very quickly gained all sorts of roles and all sorts of titles. He was Squire of the Body. He was a Knight of Bath. He was a Keeper of the Exchange. He also took on all sorts of diplomatic roles. So he went to the court of Margaret Savoy, where he made a great impression. He took part in the invasion of France in 1513. He led 100 men. He acted as an ambassador. He took part in the Field of the Cloth of Gold. So way before Anne was even spotted by Henry, he had huge responsibility and was clearly very liked and very favoured by Henry. By 1525, he'd been made the Viscount of Rochford, and apparently he was really one of Henry's inner circles. He often dined just with Henry and Charles Brandon, who's famously Henry's sort of best friend. So he was really part of this little group. In 1530, Henry apparently said that there was no negotiator as skilled as he was. He claimed that he was a Lutheran, so that he was pushing for reform. He claimed that of Anne as well, I believe. We don't know that for sure. I think he would have done very well to have kept that hidden from Henry being so close to him. The reason I mention all of his achievements isn't to make him out to be a wonderful person. It's to make the point that actually, did he need Anne to become queen for him to progress in his career? Because he was doing pretty brilliantly even without her. Maybe he pushed her in that direction, who knows, but it's worth bearing in mind that he wasn't some lowly commoner pushing his beautiful daughter towards the king in the hope of getting a bump up in life. He was doing very well for himself, and as I said, he was very much in the king's inner circle already. Some might argue that maybe he was even risking it all by setting up Henry with something that might not work out. So it's just playing devil's advocate and to kind of bear that in mind. Now, obviously, things did fall apart for him when Anne was beheaded, when she fell from favour. He lost the role of Lord Privy Seal to Cromwell. He didn't seem as if he tried to communicate with her in any way while she was in the Tower. So we do get a bit of sense of trying to save his own skin there, but again, we can't know that for sure. He did regain some standing after their fall, but he died in 1539, so only 3 years after the death of Anne and of George, and he died at Hever Castle. Another point to mention is people often think of Anne as being the commoner queen, or this idea that she kind of smelled of the shop. And what I hope is clear from the last 2 days is her mother was from a very well established, one of the most important families in the country, and her father certainly was no commoner. His own father had been a landowner and his grandfather had been the Lord Mayor, but he'd risen himself to all these different landed positions and positions of power in terms of friendship with Henry. So there you go. That's Thomas Boleyn. I talk about his career all day, but I think I've probably said enough to hopefully convince you that he was doing quite well for himself. I'll see you tomorrow for day 3 when we're going to have a little think about Mary Boleyn.